Are we doing this from now on, or is it
Just for today.
okay? I was like, this is new. Yeah. Well, let's see. Did this mic work? Hello. I can't tell. Is it working?
It's transcribed.
Okay. Good.
Hi everyone on the Student Senate YouTube. We'll be starting our orientation here shortly, so just stay on stream and we will get to it.
Thank you.
Announcement.
Do I need a mic? Oh, how do I do it? Do I just speak into it? Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Sam, Chief of Staff, Key Student Senate this year. Feel free to grab yourself. Thank you, Camden. Appreciate it. Feel free to grab yourself a slice. We got pizza in the back. There's veggie, pepperoni, and cheese. Also cookies and lemonade and whatnot. If not, you don't have to grab a slice. It's not mandatory. But yeah, we will get started here in a moment. So stay tight. But if you haven't signed in, feel free to do so as well. We have the sign-in sheet up here just so we can get everybody's attendance. Very cool. Excited to see everybody in person. It's great.
I stole it from him. Yeah.
Also, oh, is it going? Yeah. Also, before we start our meeting here, I was going to have Max Lilich, one of the directors of the CCO, make an announcement in regards to Super Service Saturday.
Hello, everyone. If I can get your attention while you're grabbing pizza, please. My name is Max Lilich. I'm the managing director of the Center for Community Outreach. We're the biggest volunteering organization here on campus. And we have our biggest event of the year coming up this Saturday. And it's the perfect opportunity to get, what is it, your like community service?
Outreach expectations.
Outreach expectations as a senator. It's a great event. You wanna talk about it?
Sure. I'm Anya Eschid. I'm a milk coordinator, which is one of the programs for CCO. So Super Service Saturday, first of all, great way to connect with the Lawrence community and volunteer and give back, but it's also a great way to connect with fellow volunteers, make some more friends. And we have free shirts, free cookies, and free breakfast. So definitely come out. Yes, insomnia cookies. So come out, pull up.
And will you scroll down?
Yes.
So to sign up, you'll scan this QR code or put in this URL. That'll take you to our website, which has the detailed instructions on how to do it. It's going to be great. We're busing you to 20 different volunteer sites. We have all kinds of places. You could be gardening. You could be helping at an airport. They're doing like tickets for helicopter rides and airplane rides for a fundraiser. You could go to Clinton Lake. All kinds of opportunities. I hope to see you on Saturday.
Thank you for that, Max. And yeah, for folks in here, I'm just going to leave the QR code up on the screen if you are interested in signing up in that. Folks online, same thing.
Do you have any questions?
Test this mic. I have not yet. Is it working? Yes, it is. Yeah, first day in years that he hasn't been a student senate. Yeah, that's
I know, we really like did a feed for everyone this week.
Not jinx.
I know, bro. See, wasn't the name a good idea?
Yeah, almost lost it all though. Okay,
Oh, really? Oh, no.
almost got it. all
You want some
tomorrow.
hand sanitizer?
Nah, I'm good. I just need to get it off my hands. Thank you, though.
Oh, no. It's
Today is
working
not
out
my
today,
day.
babe.
Yeah. How do you?
Yeah.
Do you want me to just do two?
Yeah. I like it. And then.
Oh, I seem like.
All right, everyone, as I'm seeing sort of the pizza line beginning to slow down, I think we're going to go ahead and get a start on this orientation here. I have our internal affairs director currently writing more attendance sheets for folks. Just a reminder for students, senators, this event was mandatory. So if you want to get your attendance on that sheet before the end of the event, that'll make sure we know that you've received this training and won't need any additional meetings in the semester. For folks who just showed up because you're interested in Senate, not entirely necessary, but with your KU email, we'll send you Senate news throughout the year if you are interested in that. But with that, we are going to go ahead and get a start on this presentation here. Let me go ahead and get this up. All right, so yeah, welcome to Student Senate Orientation. This is pretty much going to give you a guideline of what the structure of Student Senate is, how Student Senate functions, and how you can best succeed in this organization as we go through. My name is Alessia Garcia. I'm the Student Body Vice President, and Sam will be helping me later, but this is Sam Sokolov, our Student Senate Chief of Staff. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and start here with the structure of Student Senate. So over here, you'll have like an overarching map of what Student Senate looks like and sort of like how we conduct business. So one of the most important factors of Student Senate in our role as like a leadership university governance organization is that we get all of our power and authority from the KU student body. The KU student body elects a body of student senators, as well as a president and a vice presidential ticket during the spring elections. And that allows for the function of the structure of the Student Senate. As well, during that time, we elect 3 chairs of our student councils, which sit under the Student Assembly: Finance, Social Justice, Student Rights and Affairs. Our finance chair is Camden Baxter. Is he here? Yes, right over there. Yeah, feel free to clap. Our social justice chair is Josepha Kansu. Is she here currently? Or social justice chair? Yeah. Let's see, I don't see her currently, but we'll get that later. And then Abdullah Alawad is our student rights and affairs chair right over here. But yeah, to give you a sort of basic idea of like what this structure is and sort of like how Senate functions. Overall, StudEx, the Student Executive Council, is basically the overarching body that's sort of managing the affairs of Student Senate, making sure that everything that we're doing in this body is within the parameters of our Constitution, also within the mandate given to us by the student body and as an advisory board of the Chancellor. Within that body, we have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, all which have different folks making up and sort of making up the success of those branches. In the executive branch, we have an executive staff led by Sadie Williams, our student body president. In the legislative branch, we have the Students' Assembly, which sits as the highest legislative body of the KU Student Senate. As student body vice president, I am the president of the Students' Assembly, and so we'll generally be chairing those meetings every other Wednesday here. Under the Students' Assembly, we have our student councils, as I just described: Finance, Social Justice, and Student Rights and Affairs. All legislation, as it comes through Student Senate, as we'll discuss later, will go through councils and then through Students' Assembly. And so that's sort of the basic function of the legislative branch there. And then on the judicial branch, we have the Constitutional Court, which this is the highest student court of appeal in Student Senate. And then the Elections Commission, which primarily works to ensure that elections during the fall and spring are a success. And then you'll see over here the newly added Campus Fee Trustee Board. This is actually some of the first legislation you'll be voting on in the first cycle here. And that is the overarching board that sort of manages and sort of like assigns what the duties of the advisory boards are going to be throughout the year. And that is overseen by StudEx. Any questions thus far? I know that's a lot to throw at all of you. Just sort of a map of how this works, but understanding this map sort of gives you like an easy guideline of like how Student Senate works and functions with each other, because these branches at the end of the day share power and authority, and we sort of work with one another to get things accomplished throughout the year. All right, go to my next slide here. The Student Senate meeting schedule. So you'll find this located in the second section of your orientation handbook, and I'll go ahead and get that pulled up here if I can. Because yeah, right here, you sort of have like a basic content guideline. I definitely didn't expect all of you to read this before we got to this meeting. But this gives you a basic guideline of the structure of Student Senate, far more extensive than what this presentation is going to give you. And in there, right here, we have the entire legislative calendar for Student Senate's year. As well, during that, get this back up here. You'll sort of see like the flow sort of match as we go through. Obviously, we're at the orientation right now, but during each cycle, we'll basically have student council meetings, which will be the first meetings of each legislative cycle. And then we will have Students' Assembly meetings, which follow that the next Wednesday. All meetings will generally start at 6:30 p.m. with the exception of the Finance Council, which meets at 6 p.m. on student council days. Just general basic schedule for the legislative branch. And now I'm gonna start here with exec staff introductions. You've obviously met me as well as Sadie and Sam, but this is an opportunity that I'm going to allow for other individuals to introduce themselves on the executive staff. Let's see, Holly, do you wanna go here? Yeah, just introduce your name, major, pronouns,
Does this work?
position. Yeah, it works.
Okay. My name's Holly Hall, pronoun she, her, hers, position graduate student body president. My major is PhD in educational leadership and policy studies.
All right, and Nathaniel, would you like to go next?
Hello, I'm Theon Garcia. I'm the Internal Affairs Director. I also function as the parliamentarian for the Student Senate, so I'll be here as well a lot. I'm a political science major, senior.
Amazing. All right, and can I have other exec staff in the room stand here just so we can get a good view of y'all? Ah, there you go.
I'm not throwing it across people's.
Here, I'll have Riley introduce herself first, and she's over here.
Does this work? Hey guys, I'm Turner Seals. I'm the treasurer. I am a junior. And what else? Oh, he, him, his pronouns. Anything else I should say?
Long and short of it.
I'm a finance major, B school. Yeah, it works.
All right, Angela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela, she, her. I'm a political science major and I'm your policy director this year. Raksha.
All right, Riley.
Hi, my name's Riley. I'm the Director of Personal Relations. I run the Instagram and I'm she, her, hers, and I'm a senior.
Fabiana.
Hi, my name is Fabiana Salas. I'm double majoring in global and international studies and political science. I'm the director of social justice and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm really excited to have this position.
Danae.
Hi, I'm Danae. I'm a sophomore studying psychology and she, her, and I'm the government relations director.
Zachariah.
Good evening, guys. I'm Zachariah. I'm the fund development director. I don't really have much to say. I gotta, what's up? Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm the fund development director. Super excited. We're gonna have a late year. What do I get the thing to?
I believe that's. Do we have any other exec staff in the room to toss that to?
Anybody else? Well, I didn't give my pronouns. He, him, Sam Sokoloff, political science senior. That's all. Chief of staff. So cool.
You wanna go? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sadie. I just wanted to formally introduce myself. I'm the president. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My majors are economics and English. So if there's any English people out there, let me know. But yeah, I just wanted to say hi. So that way you at least know what my voice sounds like. Because there's a little conceited that way. So yeah.
All right, and to also do that for myself, I've already introduced myself, Alessia Garcia, use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm majoring in political science and global international studies. Right. Oh yeah, I definitely didn't lead that for myself. All right, so yeah, that's our 11-member executive staff. If you ever have any issues, questions, or thoughts throughout the year that you'd like to reach out to, you have all of these fantastic individuals to send emails to. And also interact within the Student Senate office, because we will be posting office hours next week for our exec staff members. All right, next here, we're gonna kind of go over what are the responsibilities of a senator in this space. And with that, I'm gonna go back over to the orientation handbook that we have here. I believe that is the next section here after your exec introductions. If you're interested in sort of bio information for exec, feel free to reach out. For administrative contacts, I'll also go over this here. We have one of our advisors here at this meeting tonight, Madison Orange. She is our Student Senate coordinator, and so will be assisting us in everything Student Senate this year, and we're certainly glad to have her.
Yay, Madison!
All right, and getting down to responsibilities of a senator here. So the first thing that applies here is the Student Senate Code of Ethics. So the KU Student Senate is empowered by the student body to responsibly and ethically represent student interests. For this reasons, members of all branches of government, so including the legislative, executive, and judicial together, are expected to abide by the following Student Senate Code of Ethics. The first thing is that Student Senate members will faithfully and honestly represent their constituency in the student body. So what this generally means is that you will do outreach to your constituents throughout the year to figure out like sort of what students need on this campus and what issues to advocate for. That one's not really like a hard and fast rule. You'll sort of get into it as we go through this year. But sort of one of the ways in which you can do this is by submitting legislation every cycle, you know, advocating through legislation, submitting bills for student organizations who need funding, amending the Constitution when you see there's an issue in there. Stuff like that to sort of just know that you're doing the work on behalf of the student body here. Any questions in regards to that one? Okay, yeah, pretty self-explanatory, I think. But yeah, if you have any questions after on any of these, feel free to reach out to me after the orientation here. B, Student Senate members represent a diverse and multicultural body of students and shall always be mindful and respectful of all cultures and identities while legislating on behalf of students. So this is just recognizing, you know, the challenges that marginalized identities face on this campus and sort of like how we can work to better advance equity on our campus for those students. And also making sure that conversations that we have in this space are with it holding that to their center. C, Student Senate members will present all legislation with complete and accurate information. So we don't tolerate fake news in Student Senate, basically. That's basically meaning that any sort of legislation that you will write, you will not basically lie in the legislation that you submit. Sometimes that can be kind of tricky, you know, some things are clearer than others, but just generally as like a rule, don't lie when you submit legislation on issues that we're discussing. The Student Senate members will consistently and regularly vote on matters before Senate. Each member only has one vote. So you can fulfill this expectation, and you'll see this more in like the responsibilities of a senator as we get to that as well. And that is just ensuring, you know, that you're attending all Student Senate meetings, you're casting your vote, you're making your voice heard on all matters that are coming before discussion and legislation in the Student Senate. Any questions thus far on that? Okay. All right, Student Senate will receive all bills with fair and rigorous discussion. All right, so what this means generally is that every bill matters that comes through this space, all pieces of legislation matter. And so each time that a piece of legislation comes through the space, we will respectfully discuss its merits and ensure like either one thing happens, whether the bill fails, passes, or is tabled, that we will consider the bill with fair and rigorous discussion and that we will receive it fairly in this body and not sort of prejudge it as it comes through. F, Student Senate members will actively participate in Student Senate meetings and still contribute to the conditions necessary for healthy and productive conversation, as well as promote collaboration among members to create consensus on matters pertaining to the charges of each standing council. So what this generally means is basically, you know, the discussion that we have in this space is going to be healthy and productive. We're going to try to avoid things like name calling, sort of like attaching attacks to people on legislation, things like that, and making sure that everything that we're discussing is related to the legislation and not to the individuals presenting that legislation or individuals outside the room. And as the president of the Students' Assembly, I'm sort of going to gavel down any conversation that I sort of see breaking those rules of conversation. Student Senate members shall be expected to abide by the Code of Student Rights and Responsibilities. So the current Code of Student Rights and Responsibilities that KU has on all of its websites is going to be what sort of governs behavior in this space, as it does for every space in the University of Kansas. And so just be aware of the policies and parameters within that code as it relates to, you know, your position in the Senate as well as a student. Student Senate members shall practice mutual respect for all fellow members of Student Senate and shall maintain decorum in all meetings where they represent the KU Student Senate. What this generally means is basically what I sort of alluded to earlier in F, that you will respect each other in this space as well as sort of outside of this space. That's harder for us to govern as we go through, but just really making sure that in this space you're showing your niceness, your will to represent the student body in a fair way. And then I hear student senate members shall not knowingly use their position to solicit any monetary or non-monetary gift or normally unattainable advantages from any individual. Don't get bribed. I have never seen it happen throughout my first term. I certainly hope it doesn't come in during my second term, but yeah, do not receive any monetary support for your position here in Student Senate.
That's like organization.
We can bribe you.
Yeah.
You can't be bribed by others.
That's what we call good event management. All right, any questions on the Student Senate Code of Ethics before I sort of go into the responsibilities of senator? No? All right, I will just say the Student Senate Constitution is available on the Microsoft Teams, on the Students Assembly channel, so feel free to sort of peruse that if you have any other questions or want to look at it more clearly. It's in Title I, Article 3, the Student Senate Codes of Ethics. All right, and now we'll go to Title II, Article 6, the responsibilities of being a senator. So all student senators are expected to engage with their constituents and adequately represent their needs and interests within the Student Senate. As I said, you're expected to abide by the Student Senate Code of Ethics established in the first article of this Constitution. All right, so attendance here is the first one. Attendance at all council meetings and students' assembly meetings will be required by all senators. If a senator is unable to attend a students' assembly meeting, they shall notify the internal affairs director prior to that meeting. If a senator is unable to attend a council meeting, they shall notify the respective council secretary prior to that meeting. So what that basically means here is that if you're going to miss a meeting, make sure that individuals who are recording your name for voting purposes know that you will be missing that meeting. We follow a standard of quorum in Student Senate, which means that at least half the voting members of a body have to be present for legislation to be passed. And so if you're not there and you haven't really given like a reason as to like why you're not there, it can really affect us when we're having meetings and may not have the quorum to pass certain legislation. Any questions in regards to that? You all saw me send out an email here this last Sunday that sort of describes like membership in a student council and sort of ranking which student councils you would prefer to be a member of. I need all student senators to fill out the Microsoft form at that link so that you can be placed into your student council that you're going to be required to attend throughout the year. So if you've not yet done that, please do so either as we go through this presentation or after the meeting. Yeah. Yeah, we have the councils coming on later. And so, yeah, we'll discuss those. Thank you for that. All right, next we'll go to student council membership. All student senators are required to become a member of one of the 3 student councils. So yeah, as I just alluded to earlier, attend your student council meetings. You must send information relating to student council membership, as I said, and any updates or charges to your student council membership to the Director of Internal Affairs. So as of right now, it's just this form that we've submitted out to the Senate. But in the future, if, for example, you would like to change your student council, if you're like, for example, if you're in student rights and affairs and you're just not feeling that council and you feel like you'd be more comfortable in social justice or finance, then just make sure you email the Director of Internal Affairs that you're planning on switching councils ahead of that next council meeting. Sound clear? Good. All right, outreach. Each senator will be appointed 3 student organizations to represent. It is the responsibility of the senators to reach out to their respective organizations and aid in drafting funding bills, as well as convey their needs and interests to the Student Senate. Outreach duties shall include, but not be limited to, org visits, meeting of their respective constituencies, and any other outreach programs that may take place throughout the year. So you'll sort of see this as we get into the year, as soon as we get sort of the finalized list of Student Senate or Student Involvement and Leadership Center registered organizations. They will be assigned to each of you at the next Students Assembly meeting. And so what that will basically look like is that if you're a student senator for that organization, you'll be expected to sort of like assist them throughout the year if they're going to need to write general funding bills. And you're certainly not alone in that. You can reach out to me if you need assistance writing a bill. You can as well reach out to our treasurer, Turner Seals, if you want to get more into like what the funding side of this is, especially for like interacting with your organizations. It's pretty streamlined now. Organizations will now be submitting funding forms through Rock Talk Central. And so all we'll really have to do then is draft the bill that is with your student organization. And so you'll basically just receive notification of that after. Does that pretty accurately describe that, Turner? Amazing. All right. And other outreach expectations we'll sort of go over as we get back into the Student Senate handbook here. Training here, all senators are expected to attend the legislative training sessions, which you're doing right now. So great job being early on that. And then basically becoming more familiar with the duties and how to properly write legislation. If people hadn't attended this meeting, we have to have more meetings throughout the year to sort of make sure that senators know how to work within Senate. Just very good information to have, I personally think. And then, yeah, new senators must attend these training sessions. Furthermore, senators are required to complete a social justice seminar and a Safe Zone seminar organized at the beginning of the fall and spring semesters. So for Safe Zone seminars, we're working on getting that scheduled currently through the SGD. And so you'll be receiving that information here later in the semesters to what Safe Zone seminars you might want to attend. We usually schedule a couple so that there's some variety in attendance that you can do within the first semester, but you'll receive further communication in that as the year goes on. As for social justice training, we're working out what might best work for that. One of the options might be completing the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging training that was assigned to you by the university. Otherwise, we will be looking at alternative things through the university as well. And then finally, student fee research and advocacy. All senators are required to be assigned to research one of the campus fees allocated by the Student Senate each year. They must send their first 3 preferences to our policy director, Angela Davis. You'll be expecting an email from her after student councils get through within this first cycle, because then we'll know the chairs of the advisory boards as well as other members of those advisory boards as we sort of get through into the first beginnings of our student fee process. So yeah, you will be assigned by the policy director as equitably possible to the fee that you would like to research. That's sort of why we give like the range of options there, so that if you don't get your first choice, you'll at least get your second or third choice as we go through that. Because obviously we can't put like 60 people on the transportation fee and then only like 3 on all of the other fees. This is just to create balance and then to also give you experience in sort of researching a student fee, as it's something that's very critical to, you know, our responsibility as the Student Senate here. And then once a student senator has been selected for that fee, they'll reach out to the board member on the Campus Fee Trustee Board that is responsible for ensuring this fee is researched and presented to the Campus Fee Review. You can reach out to them as well. They will probably reach out to you as soon as we get that list updated on the policy director's side. And that will just be for throughout the year, basically attending a few sessions to basically go over like what you've sort of like researched about the fee. And that could be a variety of things. You could research what's happening on our peer institution campuses across the United States. You could also look into what's sort of happening in services
And so what that is it's a set price if you're over like 6 credit hours, and every single student pays it, and the Student Senate delegates part of it. And so all of that money, we basically decide what it goes towards on this campus. And so the way that you can think about it is additional services that benefit students in a like material and tangible way. And it's completely ran by us. And so as Alessia mentioned, we help fund transportation on campus. We're also help fund Watkins Health Services, counseling and psychological services, which is like the on-campus like therapy and all of that. We help fund the rec and the union, like where we're in right now. Just a lot of different areas. Like that's not everything, but there's a lot of different things that happen. And so every single year in February, the treasurer alongside the finance council chair, which this year is Camden, and then the treasurer's Turner, they'll be leading a process kind of in tandem that's we call fee review. And so for those of you who are senators, just think is almost all of you, you all have to go to a council. And so within each council, representatives are elected to serve on the fee review subcommittee. And if you do that, then you're in charge of like this smaller group of students. It's about 13 people And each of you like sit through and like you listen to all the different people who run these fee entities talk about why their fee is important, what services they're offering to students, all the things that they were able to do this year, and then all the things that they hope to do in the upcoming years. And then they'll also ask for a certain amount of money. So sometimes they'll ask for the same amount of money as right now. Sometimes they'll ask for a little bit more, a little bit less often, but definitely not unheard of. They'll ask for a little bit less. And then that subcommittee goes through all these requests, all this information, and they basically come up with a proposal. And that is what most of you will see in your in like full Senate, or if you're in the Finance Council, you'll see it there too. So it's a pretty extensive process, but it's really important. And it's also unique to KU because what that amounts to is like that $500 that each of you pays each semester is a like roughly $21 million of funding that students directly control and directly have a voice in advocating for. And so it's one of the largest student fees, like student ran fees in the country, not because KU is like extra expensive or anything, but because most schools don't have as good of a working relationship between their student governments and their like higher administration. So we're really lucky, but with that, we take that responsibility very seriously, which is why like being finance chair, which is what Camden is serving as this year, is so important, and why the work that we do here, part of why the work that we do here matters. You know, like we're not just talking about bills that don't impact people or that like just, you know, are just like whatever. Like, it's not like student government is just this little thing. Like there are things that we do in this space that legitimately reaches and impacts every single student on this campus. And so that's why like you being here, so part of why you being here is so important, and understanding these rules is so important because it really does matter, and it matters a great deal to a lot of people if it doesn't matter to you. So yeah, just a little bit.
Thank you
It's
so much for
also
that.
my favorite thing in student senate. You can't tell.
So yeah, Sadie gave you a pretty apt explanation of the student fee process there. And yeah, you all will be critical to the first part of that process as we come through the fall, because fall is really where we get all of the research done and make sure that the fee review committee has like all of the accurate information that they need to make those best decisions when it comes to spring. And so yeah, with that, we'll go into outreach expectations. And so this sort of just expands on like what outreach can be considered as it is defined in the student senator responsibilities in the Constitution. So these are like basically the minimum expected efforts to be made by student senators. It's expected that senators from certain constituencies will have particularly burdensome and restrictive schedules. So for example, grad, law, non-trad, and pharmacy senators are exempted from 3, 4, and 5 in terms of expectations, but are still encouraged to participate in outreach beyond the listed expectations if they can. So these are the expectations sort of like as we've like come up with in the outreach responsibilities in that title. Contact your organization, as we've already discussed. Basically just, you know, the process of making bills for them and assigning funding to those organizations. Try to author at least one piece of legislation each semester. We'll receive all legislation, as I said, with fair and rigorous discussion. And so if you just want to run a bill just to see like what it feels like to run a bill, or if you see an issue that you're wanting like to really passionately write a bill or a resolution on, feel free to get in touch with one of the members of the exec or any of the veteran senators that we have in this body. And yeah, feel free to get that done, because that really sets your sort of like expectations of like how to go through student senate in the future, and also gives you a lot of like really handy skills in the bill writing process that you'll utilize in your future in student senate. Participate in Student Senate Outreach Week. Evidence of participation will be at the discretion of the communications director, and this year our public relations director. So for that, Student Senate will have sort of outreach events as we go throughout the semester, and one is an outreach week. So if you are interested in, you know, spreading the name of Student Senate and making sure that more students on campus know about Student Senate, that'll be another expectation that you could fulfill. Attend at least one event funded by the Student Senate by the end of each semester. Documentation must be provided to the communications director within a week of the event. Acceptable documentation includes, but it's not limited to, written evidence, flyer, pamphlet, brochure. It's not really going to be too difficult, just like us knowing that like senators are attending events throughout the year. And I think that's really cool. Like, you know, we fund a lot of events that come through the Student Senate. And so like attending one of those events that you voted on would probably be very interesting, especially after seeing sort of the presentation there. And then, yeah, attend at least one community outreach or service event. This includes through CCO. So like I said, Max said at the beginning, Super Service Saturday is one of those events that you can attend. Just some sort of like voluntary service or civic engagement as we get closer to the election in November. Just making sure that people, you know, are active in the KU community. All right. Any questions in regards to outreach expectations? And once again, like these are just expectations. You're not expected to do all of this within one semester. Like definitely take your time, acclimate to the student senate as you go through, especially if you're not a senator yet, you know, make sure you sort of like get comfortable in Senate before going through these. But yeah, try to at least fulfill like 1 or 2 of these a semester if you want to sort of like best represent your constituency in terms of outreach. All right, with that, we'll go back to the presentation here. All right, and as I sort of described earlier, the council that sits and sort of administers Student Senate is called StudX. So this is the council that meets once per legislative cycle and is charged with approving the schedule and agenda for Students' Assembly, tracking advisory board attendance, office policy enforcement, and serving as a compromise committee to reconcile conflicting amendments made by student councils. StudX may be called into session over the summer to address time-sensitive issues when Student Senate is not in formal session. So anything that's sort of happening in Student Senate that you're like, this doesn't feel right, report to a member of StudX, and it's something that we can receive with like fair discussion at our next like StudX meeting as they happen throughout the legislative cycle. The StudX meetings happen in between student council and students assembly meetings throughout the year. And so they're basically like the interim meeting that's going to come in between for us to handle any other student senate related business, as well as to come together and see what legislation passed the student councils that week and what's going to get advanced into the student assembly for a final vote for student senators. Any questions on sort of the function of StudX? All right, go next. All right, student councils, and this is where I'll ask chairs to come up and sort of explain about their student councils. Camden and Abdullah, if you could, yeah, just get to the front of the room here. And did Josefa get in or? Yeah, okay. But yeah, I have some stuff on here already that sort of like talks about like what the unique charges are of each of these councils, but I'll let the experts here take it away. Camden, if you want to go first.
My name's Camden. I chair the Finance Council. I'm a junior. I'm an econ major. I was also not told I'd be giving a speech today, so excuse me if this is rough. As Sadie so eloquently explained, finance's most important role is, in my opinion, the administration of the student fee. If I recall correctly, we send the most delegates to the student fee of any other council. So if that's something that you're interested in, you might consider joining Finance Committee. Apart from the student fee, which, yes, you heard Sadie right, is somewhere in the ballpark of $22 million that we students directly influence. Pretty much every other student organization on this campus that receives funding at some point has to come to the Finance Council and, you know, ask us for money to justify the expense of student funds. That is not a responsibility that any of us really take lightly. It's extremely important. The student organizations, we fund everything from satellites to, I don't know, cornhole, yeah. So if you have any interest in the nuts and bolts of how student organizations that engage the campus receive the funds to do what they do, then I would recommend Finance Committee. One last note, we actually start earlier and usually end earlier than any other committee. So if you're interested in trivia night at Dempsey's, Finance Council is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Camden. And now we have Abdullah.
Hello, my name is Abdullah Lohad. I'm the chair of the Rights and Affairs Council. My council, first of all, we review the code of the student rights and responsibilities. And basically that's the code that the university uses to, govern student behavior. So if you have any complaints or anything that you want to address relating to the code, you come to my council. Like for example, last year when Wesley Kudney was the chair, the code did not offer protections for freelance journalists. It only offered protections to like student media. So if you didn't work in the UDK or KJHK, for example, and you were a journalist and you were trying to write a story, they can basically punish you and you wouldn't really count as a student journalist. because there is nothing protecting you there. So that's what, like, one of the things that Wesley fixed there. Of course, the code goes to the university and then they approve it. We don't like fully approve the code. It has to go through them first. We review the Constitution and propose amendments. That's where the amendments start at this council, and then it goes to the student assembly and they vote on it again. So yeah, basically the Rights and Affairs Council is the guardian for student rights. It protects student rights. That's my council. Come to my council. So.
Right, and I'll go ahead and describe the Social Justice Council here, use my associate senator experience from years ago. So this council addresses the issues and concerns of marginalized communities on campus and advocates for action plans and policies that work to achieve social justice on our campus. This council must promote or otherwise support the interests of all students whose communities have been historically neglected or oppressed. And so you'll see a lot of these initiatives start out there in the Social Justice Council. One of the initiatives that they had done during my year was trying to make Lawrence a sanctuary city. That did get some traction for a bit before, Laura Kelly banned sanctuary cities in Kansas. But other than that, there's issues like that pop up throughout. They also did a review of like accessibility to the university, especially for low-income students, as we do have like a very high sort of like leave rate when it comes to like finishing out degrees, especially for like low-income students. It's somewhere within the realm of like 17 to 20% there. And so issues like that are going to be really like the meat of like what social justice does throughout the year. They also primarily receive a lot of the resolutions that we have in Student Senate. So a lot of like statements that we make as a body and petitions that we make to other governmental bodies like the Kansas State Legislature, national government, or even administration on campus is going to be covered within the sort of parameters of the Social Justice Council first. And with that, any questions in regards to the charges of each student council? Yeah, hopefully this well informs like your decision to like which student council you might want to attend this next Wednesday for your first council meeting. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any of the chairs that you just heard from. You can as well find their email information on the Student Senate website under student councils. And with that, I think that's it for that part of the presentation here. Students Assembly. Okay, so the Students Assembly, as I described earlier, serves as the highest legislative body of the Student Senate. This assembly is where all legislation that was deliberated, passed in student councils will be sent for like final review and vote. So the Students Assembly is a space in which all Student Senate members and the needs of student constituents may be discussed. Per an amendment last year that was done actually during the fee review process as well, every student has speaking rights in the Students Assembly. Every student may not have voting rights, as that's generally restricted to student senators in that body, but every student can come and make their voice heard in the Students Assembly when it comes to speaking on legislation that affects them directly. Any questions in regards to Students Assembly? As we sort of discussed earlier, I'll be chairing those meetings as student body vice president. Sam Sokolov will be my vice chair as chief of staff, and Nathaniel Garcia will be taking notes, minutes, and be running the voting for the Students Assembly. All right, so now that we sort of discussed like what the structure of the legislative branch is, now we're going to discuss like what the legislative process looks like in Student Senate. So part one, a senator has an idea for a bill or a student group requests funding. These are some of like the basic starts to a bill writing in Student Senate. Second, discuss collaboration with other senators if so desired. So we do this all the time where we'll be authoring a bill and we'll realize maybe we don't have all the knowledge on an issue that we would like to have, or we just need assistance writing the bill before we hit that Friday deadline. So collaborate with other senators in the body, reach out to other individuals who are also student senators and see if they want to sponsor your bill or help author it. And that can be a way and you can sort of like gain traction for it in Student Senate and sort of like garner votes as it goes through the process. But it could also be a good way to sort of make great social connections in the Student Senate. Using the template on the Student Senate website under documents and records, you can sort of use that as guidance for your bill as you go through. And then email that bill to the chief of staff at senatecosts@ku.edu by the legislative deadline this Friday after the Friday after Students Assembly by 5 p.m. So the first legislative deadline that you'll have coming up actually is going to be on the 26th of August, so this Friday at 5 p.m. So if you have any legislation that you would like to be submitted for cycle 1 for the student councils to review next week, please get that submitted to the chief of staff by then. And then the chief of staff will format the bill and the student body vice president will assign it to student councils. So part of my role here, once the bill gets sent to the chief of staff, is that I will assign it to student councils for review. There are some bills that just have to go to a student council just by virtue of like what they are. Constitutional amendments, as Adula touched on, have to go through the Student Rights and Affairs Council before they can be made law. And just like that as well, budget code amendments and funding bills have to go through the Finance Council, as Camden said, before they can become law. And so there are some parameters to what will happen, but generally speaking, they'll be assigned to 2 of our 3 student councils for review each legislative cycle. Each bill will be debated in student councils and can have one of 3 things happen. It can pass, people can be in support of it, and that will mean that the bill will advance into the next session. You can fail the bill, which means that bill will not advance to the Students' Assembly for a vote and will need to be resubmitted in the next legislative cycle if that person has edits to the bill. And then finally, it can be tabled or postponed. So what this means is if you don't think legislation is timely, or you think that the legislation just shouldn't be discussed during a certain session, but you don't necessarily want to fell it, you can table the bill for that session or postpone it to a certain date. So what that will generally look like is just you basically making a motion to table the bill. And with that, basically announcing that we're not going to take up the bill again. A motion to postpone the bill, however, will be like by a certain time. So you can say, I motion to postpone this bill until cycle 2 session. And that will be sort of like the time limit that's arbitrated there, and it will be brought back up in that session. Makes sense to everyone thus far? Amazing. All right, I believe that was, oh, no, still have here. Okay, so student councils can also make amendments to this legislation. So as it goes through student councils, amendments will be added if they believe that the bill needs some work to be changed before it goes to the Students' Assembly. And what will happen with those amendments is basically they will be dealt with in StudX to reconcile sort of like any conflicting amendments that are basically if like Finance Council and Rights Council amended the same parts of a piece of legislation, that's where StudX would be called in to reconcile those amendments and find like sort of like the best middle ground of what would work to give that bill to the Students' Assembly. However, if those amendments have nothing to do with one another, both will be considered for debate in the Students' Assembly that next cycle. Only bills that pass all the student councils to which they referred, as I referred to earlier, can be seen in the Students' Assembly. So if it at least fails one student council, then it means it cannot be seen in the Students' Assembly that cycle. Question from Abdullah?
Yeah, so if the bill goes from, for example, rights, goes to finance, and then rights doesn't like it, then can it go back to rights?
Could you ask that question again to the mic?
So if the bill goes from rights, it originates from rights, and then it has to go to like, for example, finance or social justice, because it has to go through 2 councils before it goes to student assembly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the original council, or like the council that had it first, doesn't like the amendment that happened in finance, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Does it go back to rights, or
No.
does it?
So what will happen, and this is a great point in terms of like legislation. So legislation that was submitted for the cycle, any amendments that are made to legislation, even if it is a constitutional amendment, will be considered in StudX, because that's the overarching body that considers like amendments to compromise on like legislation there. And so if there's any like conflicting amendments for like rights and finance, that will be decided in the Student Executive Council meeting. If, for example, rights made legislation, so for example, if they generated it through committee of the whole as a process, then that wouldn't be seen by another council. You would just bring that to StudX for review, and then StudX would act as the second student council in that faith. Because StudX, if a piece of legislation is generated not by original writing, but by the committee saying that we want to generate this legislation, then that will be considered by Studex. And if Studex thinks the legislation is timely, it will advance to Students' Assembly. If they don't believe it's timely, it'll be sent to another student council in the next cycle. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. Yeah.
All right, amazing. Any other questions?
No.
All right, perfect. All right, any other questions in regards to how that process works in Student Senate? All right. So finally, Students' Assembly debates each bill and can also pass, fail, table, or postpone, as I said earlier. Passing legislation after it's passed the student councils and the Students' Assembly, it's almost at its final hurdle. And so passing legislation takes effect when the student body president signs it, or after 10 days if the president declines to sign. So Sadie, in her position as president, can decide to issue a statement of disapproval and refuse to sign any bill that has passed the Students' Assembly. This acts as a veto and essentially stops the legislation from going to effect, even if it has passed the councils and the Students' Assembly. What happens if this occurs is that said statement is debated at the next Students' Assembly meeting, and if 2/3 the majority can vote to enact the legislation, notwithstanding president's disapproval. And so basically that is what functions in Student Senate as a veto override. Basically, if the president declines to sign or does not want a bill to go through, they can issue that veto and Students' Assembly can act on that veto if they wish in the next session. Either that, or they can consider the president's statement and say that they won't pass the bill in that session. Make sense? Amazing. All right. And so, yeah, Abdullah?
Does that apply to resolutions or only bills?
That applies to resolutions as well.
So basically everything that gets voted on.
Every piece of legislation that gets voted on. All right. And actually getting into the next legislation. So these are the funding guidelines of Student Senate. So these are what govern any funding bill that we receive in the Student Senate here. So we have 3 primary funding sources: block, line item, and the unallocated account. This is where money is drawn from throughout the year. Block and line item will happen in the spring semester, but the unallocated account is what we allocate through student councils and the DEI fund throughout the semester here. So the budget code is in Title V of the Student Senate Constitution and sort of explains like the parameters around a lot of the funding here. And yeah, that goes for that. Guidelines for funding. To qualify for funding, a student group must be open to all KU students, be registered with SILC, and have no academic standards or membership dues. So that's the first thing in terms of like organizations that must happen before it can be considered for funding votes in the Student Senate. Next, any group requesting a service fee, an honorarium, a DJ fee, etc., must turn in a contractual services form and W-9 before that legislation is passed. What that essentially means is that someone has to like make sure they work with the person that is going to be speaking at an event or playing music in an event in advance, and make sure that a W-9 is turned into the treasurer. And that's just for tax purposes, so we can ensure that the money is allocated legally. For special events, refer to the half over 1,000 rule. Senate can fund up to the first $1,000 of the cost and 50% of the remaining total of any event request that comes through Student Senate. So for example, if student group A comes in with like a $2,000 request and they're wanting to basically just fund this event that they're having, we can fund up to $1,000 at that request, but then would have to only fund the other $500 of that request to stay within the 1,050% rule. Make sense? All right, going through here. Groups seeking more than general funding, $100, should send representatives to help answer questions in student councils and a student's assembly. So when you're reaching out to student organizations who might want to write funding legislation, just make sure that they know to like send at least like one person or maybe a couple members as a delegation to those meetings so that they can explain like what is happening in the bill and like why they need this funding from Student Senate. Groups should also be advised to seek funding from other sources such as the Pepsi program funding, DEI fund, and departmental support. So looking for other avenues of funding. That's something that we consider in Student Senate as we fund organizations is, are they receiving funding not only from just us, but from other entities as well, so that we're not the only source of funding for them, especially if they're funding events that are over like, you know, thousands of dollars. Title V of the Student Senate Constitution, oh, skipped over one. Funds will be available to groups 10 days after approval at the earliest. So groups should therefore be seeking event funding earlier rather than later. So making sure they plan their event funding request about 3 weeks in advance, I believe it is, Sadie. Yes.
What we have listed on our funding request, like form this year, is 4 weeks in advance. And so the reason is because it can take a while, and then also like you want something to it, so 4 weeks in advance.
All right. Yeah, so let's use the 4-week rule this year. All right, and then Title V of the Constitution has a comprehensive list of restrictions. Please convey this information to groups before submitting a bill to reduce the risk of a bill being ruled out of order or being greatly amended. So within Title V, there's basically a list of like 30 something things that Student Senate cannot fund with its funding. And so if an event is seeking funding like that, they should be told to go elsewhere to receive that funding. Compliance does not guarantee passage. All bills are subject to debate and all senators are obligated to participate fully in the conversation, keeping in mind that the unallocated account is limited. So oftentimes this will happen in Senate that like most funding bills for student organizations will be passed throughout the year. But one thing to keep in mind is that you're not required as student senators to fund organizations if you don't believe the funding is necessary, because the unallocated count is limited to $80,000 this year that is going to be utilized throughout the entire academic year. And so making sure that we spend that money wisely and making sure that we don't run out of money before the end of the year is greatly important. And so analyzing each request and deciding like what Student Senate needs to fund, where the money needs to go, and like what events we should consider funding based on like what you want out of Student Senate this year is going to be critical. So make sure to maintain that as you receive student organizations for funding, because yeah, you will want to fund them because, you know, it's a student org. We're in a student org, so we love student orgs here. But not all funding requests need to be absolutely voted on just because the rules are there for them. All right. Any questions in regards to funding before I go on to Senate courts here? All right. And any other funding information or questions that you might need throughout the year, feel free to reach out to our treasurer. Once again, Turner Seals over here at senatetres@ku.edu. And next we will go over the Student Senate courts here. So the courts are composed of 2 separate bodies. The first one is the Elections Commission. This court is composed of 5 members, one of which serves as the Election Commission chair, and they're in charge of managing Student Senate elections, as I said earlier, in the fall and spring, and are responsible for interpreting the elections code, student referendum regulations, and petitions within the Constitution. So that's basically their bread and butter and like what they're going to be seeing throughout the year. And then the Constitutional Court, this court is composed of 3 members, one of which serves as the Chief Magistrate, and they're in charge of interpreting the Student Senate Constitution and serve as the highest court of appeal within the Student Senate. And I think we actually have our Chief Magistrate here, Tara. Hi. If you'd like to introduce yourself, or I'm putting you on the spot here. Or can we get a mic? Wherever it might be. This is like a preview of what you're gonna see during assembly this year, so we pass this mic around.
Hi, I'm Tara Wolf.
All right, everyone.
I'm Tara Wolf. I'm in my first year of law school this year, and I served as chief magistrate last year. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's about it.
and we'll be continuing this year. So thank you for that, Tara. All right. Any questions in regards to the function of the Student Senate courts? All right, and basically like the Student Senate courts are utilized whenever you believe an infraction has been made in the Student Senate Constitution. And so if you believe that one of the councils, the Students' Assembly, or even Studex made an infraction when it comes to interpretation of the Constitution, you can submit those cases if they relate to the elections code, student referendum, and petitions to the EC first. And if they relate to any other part of the Constitution, you'll send those cases to the Chief Magistrate in the Constitutional Court. Sound good? Yes.
Is there any authority above the court? Like if they make a decision?
Yes, so these are the student senate courts, so they're the primarily student composed courts of the university. So the Elections Commission and Constitutional Court are both of our courts, but overarching that in the University Senate, there is a University Judicial Board that will decide basically if those courts had made any infractions while they were going through the cases of the University Senate Code. The University Judicial Board does not have to accept cases throughout the year, but can do so if an appeal is needed. Yes.
And do they know that through having an advisor or something? Is that how they know?
For
Like in the court, if the court makes a mistake, is there like a University Senate advisor there who?
No, because the University Senate has like a separate management and university governance. What will essentially happen is if you were, for example, here, I'll give you like an example of appeal. If you had an infraction in the elections code and you wanted to appeal that, you would go to the Constitutional Court. And if you wanted to appeal the decision of the Constitutional Court, it would be on you to get that appeal to the University Judicial Board. So no one would reach out to you in regards to that. You would be submitting the appeal yourself to the UJB that you think an infraction was made.
Okay, thanks.
Of course. Any other questions? Also say thank you, Abdullah, for getting these clarifying questions in. All right. And now we're going to go through a bit of a Robert's Rules tutorial. And so in the back of your orientation handbooks, I wanted to make sure that you all knew like what Robert's Rules was and how to utilize it in Student Senate. So you see a sort of description of like what Robert's Rules of Order are here. It's a set of guidelines for parliamentary procedure with a focus on balancing the effectiveness of a deliberative assembly and the attempt to grasp as many of the voices of the deliberation as possible. And so essentially this is guidelines for debate in the Student Senate and is what we're going to enforce in terms of like speaking on legislation. So obviously we can't have like 60 people speaking forever on a bill. There has to be some order, there has to be some structure to the meeting. And so Robert's Rules of Order adds this by allowing motions to be made to pass legislation, to table legislation, to make a point of information, to have a positive speech on the bill, to have a negative speech on the bill, etc. So these things set the guidelines for discussion here in the Student Senate. And so a motion is basically just a formal proposal by a member of that assembly, and it's basically proposing that they take action for the progression of those meetings. There are 5 general groups and types of motions: main motions, which bring business before the assembly; subsidiary motions, which affect main motions; privileged motions, which just deal with urgent business and can interrupt business; incidental motions, which pertain to specific occurrences while business is conducted; and then motions that bring a question again. And so you can sort of read over like all of these different motions as they happen here. But what you also have here is a handy dandy motion cheat sheet. And these are like generally the motions that are made throughout the semester here that you can do for just the function of a meeting. You can make a motion to amend legislation, a motion to limit or extend debate, a motion to call to question, which means that we're going to go immediately to a vote on the legislation. A motion to lay on the table, as I said, is what we do for if we want to delay business. A motion to take from the table is to resume after the delay. So for example, if you did table legislation in a meeting, but you decide you want to bring it back to the agenda, you can make a motion to take it back from the table and then go back to reviewing that legislation during that meeting. A point of order will identify a violation that has been made of either Robert's Rules or the Student Senate Constitution. And then I, as the president of the Students' Assembly, if there are no objections, will make a ruling on that. If people want to question my ruling as it comes to like motions, then they can do so by getting a majority vote of the individuals within this assembly to overrule that ruling. Division is used if a vote is close. A motion to reconsider, only made by prevailing sides, will be made on certain pieces of legislation. And then a motion to adjourn is what will end a meeting and is usually what comes with like the happiest responses if we're in 3 hours worth of meeting. So yeah, with that, here. I'm just going to pass a mock bill here. And so you have like a copy here of like what a bill is supposed to look like for funding an organization. And so this is how you would generally read a bill during the Students' Assembly, is by it being projected up here. And so this is a bill to fund so-and-so student organization. Whereas the preamble of the Student Senate Rules and Regulations state, choose one or more statements from the preamble of SSRR, etc. And whereas the student org name is an undergraduate or graduate student org open to all students that is registered within SILC, and whereas provide information about the purpose and goals, etc. of the student organization requesting funding, and therefore be it enacted by the University of Kansas Student Senate here assembled that the sum of blank money be allocated from the Student Senate unallocated account to student org for the following. And then you'll have general funding just allocated at the end of this bill here to showcase like what is going to be done in this legislation. And for general motion making, we do have some confusing hand movements here in Student Senate. To make a motion that's seen by the chair, usually people will do this motion. And so very much get used to that. If you want to make a motion, like motion to call to question, like on a piece of legislation. So with that, I will just say, I'll just sort of like do a mock meeting of like how this will work. And I'm gonna lean on our veteran senators here to sort of like go for these motions. So since debate has ended, this fake debate, I'm looking for a motion to call to question on this legislation. Do I see a motion? All right, I see a motion from Farzad. Do I have a second? I think I saw one from Abdullah here. All right, so I have a motion from Farzad and a second from Abdullah. Is there any objection to moving to a vote on this legislation? You object. So see, if someone objects, then that means that we're going to be holding a vote on that motion itself as to like whether or not we should go to a vote or continue debate. So this will happen for a couple of reasons. Either the bill still needs to be further amended to satisfy members of the House that are opposed to it at its current state. Either that, or people think that discussion needs to be continued on the bill before it's over because other people want to make speeches on the bill's merits and or demerits. And so that will happen. And generally speaking, we'll sort of resolve that objection as time goes on in the Students' Assembly. And then once that vote has been made, if the vote, for example, passes, then we'll go back to debate on the bill and we won't go for a vote. If that objection fails and it seems that a majority of the chamber wants to vote on legislation, then we'll go ahead and advance. So I will say, like, I'll close off the voting here and be like, okay, so this motion clearly fails and we will move to voting on this legislation. Following that, we'll proceed to a vote. And do I see a question from Abdullah?
When there is an objection and you want to pass the objection, does it have to be like a 2/3 majority or
just a simple majority?
Just a simple majority?
Yes. 2/3 majority will be required for certain things. For example, if you want to exit committee of the whole with legislation, you have to have a 2/3 majority. If you want to pass constitutional amendments or budget code amendments or amendments to the Student Senate budget, all of those also have to have a 2/3 majority. And you can find this in Title II of the Constitution, which sort of describes the function and rules of the legislative branch when it comes to those types of legislation. Thank you for that question. And with that, we would usually go to a vote on the legislation. And if the legislation passes, I will give a little gavel sound. All right, any questions on sort of how motions are made in the Students' Assembly and in other Student Senate organizations? All right, seeing none here, we'll go on here. All right, I'll discuss that in a bit here. One of the other things that I want to make sure folks are aware of. Student Senate, oh, forgot the dot. Still made it. All right, so this is the Student Senate website as seen here. On the front page of the website here, you'll find a full Senate meetings and committee meetings are being held in person. Make sure to join the Student Senate team on Microsoft Teams for updates. So we still will be utilizing Microsoft Teams for voting this year. Basically just because it attaches like all of your like KU Microsoft information to any vote that you make on that Teams. And so it's very easy for Student Senate to track in terms of the development of voting records. And so making sure if you're a senator or involved in a student council that you download the Student Senate Teams is critical, because it's where all voting will be done throughout the year for Student Senate legislation. Feel free during this meeting or after to just go to the Student Senate websites and make sure that you are a member of the Microsoft Teams so that you can be fully aware of all the updates that happen through the year. There will also be a legislative tracker that gets added to the Student Senate Teams, as well as like our Rock Chalk Central and the website. And that will allow for folks to track legislation throughout the year as it advances through the student councils and students assemblies. So you'll see basically, you won't have to hear through word of mouth. If something is past the student councils, you'll see that develop on the tracker throughout the legislative cycle. Any questions? All right, and the only other thing I would say is that Student Senate also has a lovely YouTube channel here where all of like our meetings are streamed throughout the year. Currently, this orientation is live with 2 watching, fair. But yeah, all of the Student Senate meetings, so our turnover, the constitutional court hearing from last year, special sessions, all sessions during the cycle of StudX, student councils, and students assembly will be recorded here. All right, and just some last bits of information for you before we get let out here.
I can talk about it.
Yeah, please do, Sam.
Okay. Yes.
Come up to the mic, yeah.
So, hello. Yes, so any KU student can join a Student Senate Council, and after you go to 2 council meetings, you get voting rights, correct?
Yes.
Of course. But if you want to become a student senator, vote in the full Students Assembly, we also have positions. We have 5 open senator positions for freshmen. So freshman senators represent their freshman class in the Students Assembly. The freshman elections will be held from 6 a.m. on October 4th to 4 p.m. October 5th. Voting will be digital and utilize Rock Chalk Central. So if you're interested in becoming a freshman senator, you must submit a declaration of candidacy by 5 p.m. on September 29th to my email, senatecos@ku.edu.
Chalk Central.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's you. Sorry, Rock Chalk Central. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Cool beans.
Cool.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
All right, and the final guidelines here for Student Senate here. Every year, Student Senate holds its general election during the spring semester. And during this election season, the student body president and vice presidential tickets develop platforms and goals that they hope to accomplish for their student constituents through the Student Senate. This year, Sadie and I developed and worked with members of our student coalition at Astra to create a list of platforms that we hope to achieve on behalf of the student body. These platforms can be found at studentsenate.ku.edu for you to peruse, and will sort of like guide what's going to be happening in our advisory boards this year and student council legislation and all of that. So it'll just be on the Student Senate website here, going to About Us, and then you can find our helpful platform guide describing what they are, as well as like each of the platforms and details about like what these platforms will entail. Any questions in regards to that? Yeah.
Can freshmen become replacement student senators?
Freshmen can become replacement student senators as well. So if you want to announce that process as well.
Yes, that's what I missed. Okay, yes, also for grad students. Okay, so if you're a grad student, please talk to Holly Hall right there. Yeah, at the end, as Senate grad pres. There's also, you'll fill out a form, it's on our website, studentsenate.ku.edu, to become a replacement senator. You can also, we have a few vacant positions open as well, and I think it shows on the website all the vacant positions right now. So if you don't get elected a freshman student senator, or you'd like to represent your class or like that specific, your field of study instead of the freshman body as a whole, you can become a student senator that way and serve on student assembly through that.
Thank you for that, Sam. All right, and with that, do we have any final questions about anything that was gone over during this presentation? All right, if not, do I see a motion to adjourn? All right, I see a motion from Angela over here, a second from Farzad. Do I see any objections?
You're good. Keep going. You can adjourn.
Yeah, all right, we are adjourned.
Really quickly, as you're filing out, if you feel a little bit overwhelmed or nervous or anything like that, just like take a deep breath. There are so many people in Student Senate who are here to support you and help you get through this. And so if it feels like a lot, I promise you it's very manageable. But yeah, so don't hesitate to reach out to anyone on exec.
Thank you, Sadie.
Feel free to take pizza too. We still have a little bit left in the back. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on